Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Creation, Chapter 11, Verse 24. Rajamargam gate Krishne Dwarakaya Kulastriyah Harmanye Arurhur Vipra Tad Ikshana Mahotsavaha.
Hare Krishna, when Lord Krishna passed over the public roads, all the ladies from the respectable families of Dwarka went up to the roofs of their palaces just to have a look at the Lord. They considered this to be the greatest festival.
Text 25. Nityam nirikshamananam yad api dwarakokasam na vitrapayanti hi drishah Shriyodhamangamam achyutam.
The inhabitants of Dwarka were regularly accustomed to look upon the reservoir of all beauty, the infallible Lord, yet they were never satiated.
नहीं तो अपनी भाभी जी लोग इंडिया से ज्वाइन कर लेंगे, जूम पे ज्वाइन करवा लेंगे.
Text 20.
I am not sure, Kiran.
Reciters, please unmute yourselves.
Hare Krishna. Text 26. Shriyo nivaso yasyorah panapatram mukham drisham bhavoloka palanam saranganam padambujam.
The Lord's chest is the abode of the goddess of fortune. His moon-like face is the drinking vessel for eyes which hanker after all that is beautiful. His arms are the resting places for the administrative demigods, and his lotus feet are the refuge of pure devotees who never talk or sing of any subject except his lordship.
Text 27. Sita patra vyajnair upakstrah prasuna varsarabhivarshitah pati pishango vasvana malya babho gano yathar kutpo kapa vidyutah.
As the Lord passed along the public road of Dwarka, his head was protected from the sunshine by a white umbrella. White featured fans moved in semicircles, and showers of flowers fell upon the road. His yellow garments and garlands of flowers made it appear as if a dark cloud was surrounded simultaneously by sun, moon, lightning, and rainbows.
Text 28. Pravishtastu griham pitroho pravistakta swamatrabhihi vavande sirasa sapta devaki pramukha mudha.
After entering the house of his father, he was embraced by the mothers present, and the Lord offered his obeisances unto them by placing his head at their feet. The mothers were headed by Devaki, his real mother.
Text 29. Taputram makham aropya snesnuta payodharaha harsha vihvalitatmanah shishichur netra jarjalah.
The mothers, after embracing their son, sat him on their laps. Due to pure affection, milk sprang from their breasts. They were overwhelmed with delight, and the tears from their eyes wet the Lord.
Text 30. Atha vishadsva bhavanam sarvakamam manuttamam prasadayatra patininam sahasrani cha sodasha.
Thereafter, the Lord entered his palaces, which were perfect to the fullest extent. His wives lived in them, and they numbered over 16,000.
Text 31. Patnya patim prosya grahnanupakkam vilokya sanjata mano mahotsavaha uttastho rarat sah sayat sakam vrater vradita lokachananaha.
The queens of Lord Sri Krishna rejoiced within their minds to see their husband home after a long period abroad. The queens got up at once from their seats and meditations. As was socially customary, they covered their faces shyly and looked about coyly.
Text 32. तम आत्मजय दृष्टिभिर अंतरात्मना दुरंत भावः परिरेबिरे पतिम निरुद्धम अप्य अस्रवद अम्बुनेत्रयोर विलज्जति नाम भृगुवर्य वैक्लवात्.
The insuperable ecstasy was so strong that the queens who were shy first embraced the Lord in the inmost recesses of their hearts. Then they embraced him visually, and then they sent their sons to embrace him, which is equal to personal embracing. But, O chief amongst the Brigus, though they tried to restrain their feelings, they inadvertently shed tears.
Text 33. यद्यप्यसौ पार्श्वगतो रहो गतस् तथापि तस्याङ्घ्रिः गुहं नवं नवं पदे पदे काव्यरमेत तत्पदाच् कलापि यच्चरीर्न जहति कर्हिचित्.
Although Lord Sri Krishna was constantly by their sides, as well as exclusively alone, his feet appeared to them to be newer and newer. The goddess of fortune, although by nature always restless and moving, could not quit the Lord's feet. So, what woman can be detached from those feet, having once taken shelter of them?
Text 34. एवं नृपाणां क्षितिभार्जन्मानाम् अक्षौहिणीभिः परिवत्र तेजसां विद्याविरं श्वसनो यथा नलं मिथो वदेनो परतो निर्युधः.
The Lord was pacified after killing those kings who were burdensome to the earth. They were puffed up with their military strength, their horses, elephants, chariots, infantry, etc. He himself was not a party in the fight. He simply created hostility between the powerful administrators, and they fought amongst themselves. He was like the wind which causes friction between bamboos and so sparks a fire.
Text 35. स एष नर लोकेऽस्मिन् अवतीर्ण स्वमायया रेमे स्त्रीरत्नकुटास्थो भगवान् प्रकृतो यथा.
That supreme personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, out of his causeless mercy, appeared on this planet by his internal potency and enjoyed himself amongst competent women as if he was engaging in mundane affairs.
Text 36. उद्ददाम भाव पिशुनामल वल्गुहासा वृदावलोक निहतो मदनोऽपि यसां समूह्यो चापम् अजहात् प्रमोदतमास्त यस्येन्द्रियं विमोहितुं कः कैर्न सेकुः.
Although the queen's beautiful smiles and furtive glances were all spotless and exciting, and although they could conquer Cupid himself by making him give up his bow in frustration, and although even the tolerant Shiva could fall victim to them, still, despite all their magical feats and attractions, they could not agitate the senses of the Lord.
Text 37. Tam ayam manyate loko hay asangamapi sanginam atmopam yena manujam vyapravanam yato buddha.
The common materialistic conditioned souls speculate that the Lord is one of them. Out of their ignorance, they think that the Lord is affected by matter, although he is unattached.
Text 38. Etad ishnam ishasya prakritistopi tadgunah na yujyate sudatma sthir yatha buddhis tadashraya.
This is the divinity of the personality of Godhead. He is not affected by the qualities of material nature, even though he is in contact with them. Similarly, the devotees who have taken shelter of the Lord do not become influenced by the material qualities.
Text 39. Tamme nirebala mudha stranam chanu vratam rathah apraman vidho bhartu ishwaram matayo yatha. Hare Krishna.
The simple and delicate woman truly thought that Lord Krishna, their beloved husband, followed them and was dominated by them. They were unaware of the extent of the glories of their husband, as the atheists are unaware of him as the supreme controller. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much to the wonderful devotees for their recitation. Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Today's verse is 37 and 38. However, before we start, let's just do a quick prayer in Bhagavatam. O Srimad Bhagavatam, nectar churned from the ocean of all Vedic scriptures, you are the most prominent transcendental fruit of the Vedas and are enriched with the jewels of all philosophical conclusions. You grant spiritual vision to all people of the world and are the very life breath of the Vaishnava devotees. O Lord, you're the sun which has arisen to dispel the darkness of Kali Yuga. Actually, you are Lord Krishna who has returned among us. O Srimad Bhagavatam, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. By your recitation, one attains transcendental bliss because your syllables shower pure love of Godhead. You are to be served by everyone, always, for you are an incarnation of Lord Krishna. I do beg your pardon if you can hear the clock in the background. O Srimad Bhagavatam, O my only friend, companion, and teacher, O my great wealth and deliverer, O my good fortune and bliss, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. O Srimad Bhagavatam, O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O uplifter of the most fallen, please never leave me, accompanied by pure love of Krishna. Please manifest yourself in my heart and my throat. So, Hare Krishna, dear devotees, very good evening to you. Today we're looking at verse 37 and 38. And let's start with verse 37. So the translation is, the common materialistic conditioned souls speculate that the Lord is one of them. Out of their ignorance, they think that the Lord is affected by matter, although he is unattached. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The word Buddha is significant here due to ignorance only. The foolish mundane wranglers misunderstand the Supreme Lord and spread their foolish imaginations amongst innocent persons by propaganda. The Supreme Lord Shri Krishna is the original primeval personality of Godhead, and when he was personally present before the eyes of everyone, he displayed fully fledged divine potency in every field of activities. As we have already explained in the first verse of Srimad Bhagavatam, He's completely independent to act however he likes, but all his actions are full of bliss, knowledge, eternity. Only the foolish mundaners misunderstand him, unaware of the eternal form of knowledge and bliss, which is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads. His different potencies work in a perfect plan of natural sequence and doing everything by the agency of his different potencies. He remains eternally the supreme independent, and when he descends on the material world by his causeless mercy to different living beings, he does so by his own potency. He is not subject to any condition of the material modes of nature, and he descends as he is originally. The mental speculators misunderstand him as the Supreme Person, and so they consider his impersonal features as inexplicable Brahman to be all. Such a conception is also the product of conditioned life, because they cannot go beyond their own personal capacity. Therefore, one who considers the Lord to be at the level of one's limited potency is only a common man. Such a man cannot be convinced that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is always unaffected by the modes of material nature. He cannot understand that the sun is always unaffected by infectious matter. The mental speculators compare everything from the standpoint of experimental knowledge of their own selves. Thus, when the Lord is found to act like an ordinary person in matrimonial bondage, they consider him to be one of them, without considering that the Lord can at once marry 16,000 wives and or more. Due to a poor fund of knowledge, they accept one side of the picture while disbelieving the other. This means that due to ignorance, only they always think of Lord Krishna like themselves and make their own conclusions, which are absurd and unauthentic from the version of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So, dear devotees, the Srimad Bhagavatam is telling us that if you are a conditioned soul, if you're materialistically conditioned, that is, that you are in the jurisdiction of the modes of material nature, whether it's in goodness, passion, or ignorance, you will not be able to understand the Supreme Lord. And so, therefore, Srila Prabhupada goes on to explain that, the verse actually explains that there's only speculation about understanding that the Lord is perhaps even one of them. And so Srila Prabhupada is saying this is not just Srila Prabhupada, but the verse is saying that this is out of ignorance, that they think the Lord is affected by matter, although he is unattached. When I read this, I think one of the key things I was thinking about is the Chatur Shloka. That the Chatur Shloka really clarifies to us that the Supreme Lord is the cause of all causes. He's the Supreme Person. He exists before, during, and after annihilation. The Lord actually exists everywhere, in everyone, in everything. He is Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. The Lord, how should I put it? The Lord is pure and uncontaminated, yet he, because he exists in everything. However, to think of anything without the Lord is actually illusion. Therefore, one must search for the Lord. In our search for the Lord, here it's explaining to us the danger that if we are conditioned, because of course the Lord is not of material nature, the Lord is, he creates the material nature, but he's not part of it. And therefore, it would be wrong of us to even actually understand who the Lord is. When we look at the Lord's form, his pastimes, his nature, we begin to understand, particularly in the Lord's form, where his belly is the form of, represents creation, that actually even the material creation for us, ladies and gentlemen, is incomprehensible. It's so difficult to even understand material nature, let alone how does one understand who the Lord is? So Prabhupada tells us here that, the word Buddha is significant because, he's saying that foolish, those who are foolish will misunderstand the Supreme Lord according to their imaginations. And to a certain extent, we can only imagine who the Supreme Lord is. We hear about him, we chant about him, we sit in sadhu sangha, we're in sankirtan. But the question we have to really ask is, sorry, Krishnagi Mataji, you're asking me to share the screen, but today, I don't know, for some reason my screen on my computer isn't working, so I'm just having to.
Jyoti Mataji, maybe she can do it for you.
Oh, what's that?
Jyoti Mataji, I think she's got it right. She can share the screen with us.
The actual verse on the screen. Would you like
What,
that?
Mataji,
Okay.
what verse shall I share?
37 at the moment, please.
Okay, no worries. I'll
Yeah.
share it now.
Okay, sure. Thank you. So, yes, so where was I? So actually, if it's incomprehensible to actually understand the material nature, then how do we actually experience the Lord himself? How do we understand the Lord? So, Srila Prabhupada really towards the end tells us that because of our poor fund of knowledge, we're not actually able to understand how great the Lord is. But he gives us an example by saying that, the Lord can at once marry 16,000 wives or more. But, he's saying on the one hand, we can accept one aspect of the Lord, but on the other hand, we find it very, very difficult. Why? Because for those who are, as he says, in ignorance, they believe that the Lord is one of us. So how can he, particularly in this situation, be married to 16,000? How can he have 16,000 wives and still be happy? And when Narada Muni visits him in Dwarka, he's doing different things with different wives and their families, and he's looking after all of them. So this is actually very difficult if you're on a materialistic platform to actually understand that. Jyoti Mataji, let's go to verse 38. And let me just read the verse. It is that this is the divinity of the personality of Godhead. He's not affected by the qualities of material nature, even though he's in contact with them. Similarly, the devotees who have taken shelter of the Lord do not become influenced by material qualities. So again, to the Chatushloki is very relevant for us here, because the Lord, the creation, all of creation comes from the Lord. The Lord remains before, during, and after annihilation. The Lord is in everything and everyone, yet he remains pure and uncontaminated. And therefore we must, everything, and then the other thing is, everything without him is illusion. So one must seek the Lord. And so what does that really mean here? It's saying very clearly that we cannot at all associate the Supreme Lord with material qualities. Okay, the Lord is, as Srila Prabhupada says in the purport, he's Nirgun. That let me read the purport rather than trying to explain it. So again, I'm going to repeat, this is the divinity of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is not affected by the qualities of material nature, even though he's in contact with them. Similarly, the devotees who have taken shelter of the Lord do not become influenced by material qualities. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. In the Vedas and the Vedic literature, Shruti and Smriti, it is affirmed that in the divinity there is nothing material. He is transcendental, Nirgun, only, the supreme cognizant, Hari, or the personality of Godhead, is the supreme transcendental person situated beyond the range of material affection. It's interesting, isn't it, that the Lord is beyond the range of material affection. These statements are also confirmed even by Acharya Shankara. One may argue that his relation with the goddess of fortune may be transcendental, but what about his relationships with the Yadu dynasty, being born of that family, or his killing the non-believers like Jarasandh and the other asuras directly in contact with the modes of material nature? The answer is that the divinity of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is never in contact with the qualities of material nature in any circumstances. Actually, he's in contact with such qualities because let me just read that again. The answer is that the divinity of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is never in contact with the qualities of material nature in any circumstance. Actually, he's in contact with such qualities because he is the ultimate source of everything. Yet he is above the actions of such qualities. He is known, therefore, as Yogeshwara, or the master of mystic power, or in other words, the all-powerful. Even his learned devotees are not affected by the influence of material modes. The 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan all came from greatly rich and aristocratic families, but when they adopted the life of mendicants in Vrindavan, superficially they appeared to be in wretched conditions of life, but factually they were the richest of all in spiritual values. Such Mahabhagavatas, or first-grade devotees, although moving amongst men, are not contaminated by honor or insult, hunger or satisfaction, sleep or wakefulness, which are all resultant actions of the 3 modes of material nature. Similarly, some of them are also engaged in worldly dealings, yet they are unaffected. Unless these neutralities of life are there, one cannot be considered situated in transcendence. The divinity and his associates are on the same transcendental plane, and their glories are always sanctified by the actions of Yogamaya, or the internal potency of the Lord. The devotees of the Lord are always transcendental, even if they are sometimes found to have fallen in their behavior. The Lord emphatically declares in the Bhagavad Gita 9:30 that even if an unalloyed devotee is found to be fallen due to a previous material contamination, he is nevertheless to be accepted as fully transcendental because of him being engaged 100% in devotional service of the Lord. The Lord protects him always because of his rendering service unto him, and the fallen conditioned souls are to be considered accidental and temporary. They will vanish in no time. Again, this verse is, Srila Prabhupada is really emphasizing that the Lord is beyond material nature. And of course, this verse is saying, well, the Lord is, he doesn't become influenced, neither does his devotees. And as we're going further down, Srila Prabhupada mentions the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, that whilst they came from great, rich, and aristocratic families, they had adopted the life of mendicants in Vrindavan, and superficially they appeared in a wretched condition of life. Well, we know the story of Sanatana Goswami. He wants to go and join. Sanatana Goswami. The Goswamis. They're sort of becoming. Certainly, Sanatana Goswami. He's becoming more and more attached to Sankirtan and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He's not so interested in serving the Chandakazi anymore. A few times he fakes that he's ill, and Chandakazi actually finds out he isn't. So he puts Sanatana Goswami in jail. And, Sanatana Goswami at that time had a lot of wealth, and he gave so many gold coins away to the prison officer, just so that he could release himself, of which he only kept 8 gold coins. So the vast majority of his wealth that he had on him, he was able to give away, just so that he could be freed. So this is one of the examples that you have of, the six Goswamis, that whilst they were very rich and aristocratic, they still adopted the life of mendicants. And then, of course, when Sanatana Goswami goes to Vrindavan, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is in the house of Tapana Mishra, Chaitanya Prabhu realizes that he's arrived. And he says, "Oh, bring the Vaishnav in." Tapana Mishra looks around and goes, "Oh, I don't know. There's no Vaishnav out there, my lord." And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu sends him again, says, "No, go and have a look." He said, "Oh, it's just a Muslim Mohammedan outside." And then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, "Bring him in," because he's looking so wretched and disheveled. But actually, this is one of when we think about the Lord and his opulences, the Lord is full of fame, intelligence, strength, wealth, beauty, and the last, opulence is renunciation. So this is what Srila Prabhupada is actually telling us, that, when, the devotees of the Lord are extremely opulent, because, they when you can let go of your attachment to material things, then that is ultimately the test for all of us. That can we, because of course the needs are of the body, but the soul transcends the body. So when they get to such an advanced level of consciousness, they're not really too bothered about their body. They've gone past that stage where, because when we have a body, we have fear, we have lamentation, we have, the senses are driving us. But here, Srila Prabhupada and Bhagavatam is telling us that, we can learn about the Lord through his devotees. And certainly in the case of Sanatana Goswami, even, when he leaves, he manages to escape the jail with, he's still got 8 gold coins, of which his Ishna, I think Ishna was his servant. Ishna had kept 1, but because Sanatana Goswami had understood that the innkeeper was going to kill them for the gold coins, because he was such a great diplomat, he sort of said to the innkeeper, "Look, I've got this money, and if you get me over the river, then I'd like to give it to you all. But get me over the river as an act of divinity and as an act of service." So at that point, the innkeeper sort of tells Sanatana Goswami, "Actually, if you didn't give me the money, I would have killed you for it." But Sanatana Goswami knew that, because advanced devotees do understand the hearts and minds of others and can see through them. And at that point, he has a change of heart, because this is what happens when you're in the association of great devotees. And anyway, the innkeeper said, "No, I'll do it. I don't want your money." And of course, Sanatana Goswami says, "No, you have it, because if you don't have it, somebody else will probably find out, that I have this money, and they'll want to kill me instead." So he gets across the river, and then, of course, Sanatana Goswami also realizes that his servant's holding on to a gold coin, which, in other words, would compromise his safety, but also that the servant was still hanging on, attached to something material. So instead of chastising him and telling him, "Oh, you're a rascal, you shouldn't be holding on to this, and simply depend on the Lord," he just tells him, "Just go back home, take the gold coin and go back home." And of course, he goes on his travels to Vrindavan to meet Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So this is a good example of the story of Mahabhagavats, so first grade devotees, that they move amongst men, but they're not contaminated by, as Prabhupada says, honor or dishonor, hunger or insult, satisfaction, sleep, wakefulness, whether they have money or not, whether they're going to eat the next day or not. These are obviously highly, highly advanced souls. Why are they highly advanced? Because they've tapped into consciousness beyond material nature, and therefore they're not really thinking so much about, their bodily needs. Whereas we might be thinking, well, I haven't had lunch, I'm hungry, I need to have my dinner, or, today I fancy a bag of crisps, or I don't know. I'm just sharing with you perhaps things that I might be thinking. But, it's because our mind, our intelligence, our senses, we're so driven and governed by them that only when we can overcome our conception of our body, that we can actually recognize the Lord within everyone, but also recognize Mahabhagavats. And that's usually the problem for us, dear devotees, because we're not able to actually recognize great devotees who live amongst us. So I'm going to stop there, because now you have one more verse left for tomorrow, and I was asked to cover 2 verses. So what I'm going to do is just recap this whole chapter for us, and that is that the chapter entitled Lord Krishna's entrance into Dwarka. At the beginning of this chapter, reaching the border of Dwarka, Lord Krishna, if you recall, blows his conch shell, heralding his arrival to Dwarka. And all the citizens, they're even those who are dejected because of the Lord's absence. Of course, this is one of the symptoms of great devotees, that, or the highest expression of love is the one that one experiences in separation of the Lord. They as soon as they realize that the Lord is, they've been dejected due to the Lord's absence, they hasten towards the Lord with presentations, and they welcome him with ecstatic speeches, and the Lord enters the city and he acknowledges their greetings. Later on in the second quarter of this chapter, you've been reading about Sutta Goswami describing the opulence of Dwarka and of the city and the reception for welcoming Lord Krishna. It's so beautiful when you read the descriptions of how wonderful it is in terms of how the Lord is. One of the qualities of the Lord is beauty, and we can see how Dwarka was such a beautiful city in terms of welcoming the Lord. So Lord Krishna, in turn, he appropriately reciprocates with everyone who came to welcome him. I don't know if you covered in your reading about the types of pious trees, the impious trees. What is a Vedic reception? There was also some reading on the prostitutes that were in the marketplace, and how that they were unalloyed devotees of the Lord. And I think this verse also tells us, ladies and gentlemen, that we have no right to judge who is a devotee and who isn't. And that's the Lord is master of mystics, but just because superficially, like Srila Prabhupada explains to us in this verse, somebody who's fallen down, equally that even the prostitutes within Dwarka come up to see the Lord because they can recognize the Lord. And what does that tell us? We also read a little bit, or you did, about female respectability and how that's preserved in Vedic culture. That the women were, they were on the rooftops. They sent them children. When the Lord hugs the children, it's almost an expression of him hugging their mothers. We've also covered the 7 mothers, and then of course the principle of the Lord marrying 16,000 wives. And right towards the end, there were discussions about the Lord and his queens. So one of the things that personally, for me, I found very enchanting is that when Lord passes over the public roads, the ladies on the rooftop actually look at him, and everyone's happy. Everyone's happy that the Lord has arrived. And when we think about that, maybe when our consciousness is clean, the Lord will arrive within our heart. And of course, when he arrives within our heart, everything is beautiful. The roads are beautiful, people are beautiful, everything around us is wonderful. And it describes here as if a dark cloud that had surrounded simultaneously the sun, the moon, the lightning, the rainbows, everything opens up. And Lord Krishna, he now enters into his father's house and exchanges affection with his mothers. And then finally, just towards the end, and particularly in today's verses, we covered Lord Krishna simultaneously and separately entered into his 16,108 homes and palaces where he met his queens. And Sutta Goswami explains that the Lord's transcendental character and nature of his relationship with his queens. So I think I'm going to stop there. It's 8:30. And maybe invite you all to make some comments. What inspired you about this chapter, particularly the Lord entering into Dwarka? Okay, so if you don't have any comments, we can close today's session. Thank you so much. It's been a privilege to come back again and do this class. And, I pay my humble obeisances to you.
Patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Thank you, Mataji.
Thank you, Mataji.
Thank you,
Hare
Mataji. Hare
Krishna.
Krishna.
Hare
Have a
Krishna.
nice evening.
Hare Krishna.
Nandrani. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.